You're good. Oh, I'm live. All right. Yellow arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I'm your host this evening. And as you can see, I am not alone. I have an amazing artist here with me to talk art. So with me today is Jeff Olson. He is the Art Education Director for Royal Talens North America, and he has a very fun thing planned for us today. Now,
I do. Thank you. And hello, everybody.
Now, just so you guys do know, today's class is JL190. If you see anything that Jeff is presenting that you are interested in, make sure to go to the website, jerrysartarama.com, and in the search bar, type in the code JL190, and the teacher's cart should come up with all the items that he's using. And if you throw anything else in there, I'll be able to add it to the cart as well. So now just to remind you guys, we are only live on Facebook right now, but as soon as it is finished, it will be available for you guys to rewatch. And then within 24 hours, we'll upload it to YouTube as well. But without further ado, and without much more jibber jabber for me, please take it away, Jeff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again. Always fun to be here and glad to be back for sure. Today I have a combination of things. I've got a presentation, a short presentation that I'm going to share with everybody. Very similar to what we talked about last time. I was trying to think, I think it was last June or this past June, right? So it's been a little while when we talked about acrylic. So it's the same subject, but I've added some more information so we can really geek out on materials and talk in depth about what acrylics are all about. I've got some additional information on the pigments that we talked about last time that I'm going to share, especially about or as it relates to the specialty colors. And then I've got a fun demo. Again, this will be a little different than last time. Some of the same principles at play, but looking at it in a new way, really focusing on the idea of using these colors to mix and create your own luminescent colors. So we'll have that demo at the end. And then, of course, we are going to have a giveaway. And I'm going to give some more details about that, too. We are going to give away a 90 tube set of the 20 mil colors. So the entire range of Amsterdam, including the specialty colors that we're going to talk about today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And in a second, you're going to see this presentation come up.
Yes.
Yay.
Perfect.
We're in business. So yeah, and look at the fun graphics too. I'm getting really fancy with all this stuff. So today we're talking Amsterdam all acrylics, the specialty colors specifically, which are our pearl colors, our metallic colors, and our reflex colors. And I'll be focusing on mixtures. So creating luminescent mixtures with these particular pigments. So a lot of fun. Just a little bit of an introduction before we dive into the presentation. So Royal Talens. Here's our home base in Apeldoorn. We were established in 1899. And if you've never been to the Netherlands, never been to Holland, Apeldoorn is about an hour east of Amsterdam by train. Beautiful small city, home to the summer palace for the royal family. When we get back out in the world and traveling again, and when you're in the Netherlands, definitely stop by and say hello. We manufacture fine art materials, including brands like Rembrandt. So Rembrandt oils and pastels, you're probably familiar with. Those are our marquee brands. We also are the makers of Van Gogh colors. So the oils, the watercolors and pastels. Amsterdam all acrylics, which we'll be talking about today. Ecoline liquid watercolors, and many, many more brands. So they are all part of the Royal Talens family. We introduced acrylics, which was our subject today, in 1970, and the Amsterdam line was introduced in 1976. Royal Talens North America was established in 2015. Now, you could purchase the Royal Talens products in North America prior to this through third-party distributors, but in 2015, we opened up our own center, our own distribution and warehouse facility in Northampton, Massachusetts. And it's been wonderful as we've been able to increase the quality of service to all of our customers and artists throughout North America. So happy about that. And if you want to learn more about Royal Talens, It's royaltalens.com, and then royaltalensnorthamerica.com for specifically what's happening here on our side of the Atlantic. Next, myself. So I am the Art Education Director. I have an MFA in Painting and Drawing, which I received in 1992. It seems like forever ago, right? I have 10+ years university educator experience. So I taught a lot of studio art and also some art history at university level. I've been in the art materials industry now for 20+ years. So I think it's 23 years this spring, to be exact, but about every aspect of the industry, primarily on the retail side and the art education side, of course. And then 30 years as an exhibiting artist. So I am a painter too. You can see me here at work in my studio, and that's where I'm at today, coming to you from Seattle, Washington. And if you'd like to see more of my work or learn more about my practice, you can visit my website, jeffolsonart.com. All right, so let's get to the agenda. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to give you a brief history of acrylics. In the beginning, we'll talk about the context of what are probably one of the newest materials that artists, painters specifically have been using. So we'll get into that. Then I'm going to talk about exactly what the acrylic polymer emulsion, the binder is. So it's the binder that gives the paint its working properties. That's true whether you're talking about oils, acrylics, watercolors. The characteristics of a paint really have everything to do with the type of binder. Then I'm going to talk about the pigment categories. So these are the coloring agents for the paints, of course, and they're universal to all types of paints. And I'm going to talk specifically about the specialty pigments and what makes them so unique and how they work and how they do their magic, if you will. Then I'm going to go over briefly the features of the Amsterdam line, and then of course the demo. And then finally, after the demo, we're going to come back and we're going to have our giveaway. So here's the rules for the giveaway, at least briefly. We'll talk about them again at the end. But I'm going to ask a question based on the presentation I'm giving you now. So pay attention. We're going to give away, like I said, a 90 set of our 20 mil tubes, every color in the Amsterdam family, including the specialty colors. And so I'm going to ask a question. And when you know the answer, you're going to type that into the comments on Facebook. And then we're going to come back around and select a winner. So just one winner of this 90 tube set. So make sure you're paying attention, taking notes. All right.
It doesn't actually have to be the very first person to get it right. We're just the people that did get it correctly. We're going to choose from that as like a random drawing. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. So it should be fun, and I'm excited to get to that portion of it. But let's go ahead now and start looking at the acrylic itself. So acrylic in the beginning. So we have the acrylic polymer, and the word acrylic itself was coined in the mid-19th century, 1843 to be exact. It was a derivative of acrolein. Acrolein is an oil that in itself, again, is a derivative of glycerol or glycerin. So the basic polymer, if you will, for acrylics has been around since the mid-19th century. In the late 19th century, we have the first polymers introduced in a type of use or formula. But it really took until the 1930s for this dapper gentleman here. This is Otto Röhm, a partner in the chemical company that became Röhm and Haas. He patented the first acrylic polymer resin in the 1930s. And uniquely enough, before it was used for paints and before it caught on for that, he was also the patent holder for plexiglass. So plexiglass was his term, and it was used in the beginning primarily during World War II and the windows of these bombers, and had military uses. It was used in periscopes of submarines and all sorts of things that typically would have been glass, but a much harder, more durable surface. And a big part of the war effort in the United States aeronautical industry. So the person who's responsible for acrylic paint, also responsible for plexiglass. All right, so when did we get to the paint? So the paints came around in the 40s themselves. The original acrylic paints, and a lot of people don't know this, they were spirit-based. So that means you had to use white spirits with them. So it wasn't something that we used with water in the very beginning. One of the first ones was this brand right here. This is Leonard Bocour and his partner Sam Golden. That name sounds familiar, right? They introduced the first acrylic spirit-based paint called Magna. And it was somewhat popular. And one of the first proponents or first artists to really dive into it, you can see his image in the back here, is Liechtenstein. These were different from the paints we use today, not only because you had to have spirits to mix with them, but they also had a little different sheen to them. They were a little glossier than what we have today in acrylics. And the resin itself was a little different in its working properties also. It still had more of the same working properties that we would associate with acrylics than with an oil paint, but not exactly the kind of thing that we're working with today in our water miscible acrylics. All right, some of the first artists to really embrace these new acrylics were the Mexican muralists. So artists like Diego Rivera, Jose Orozco, Sequeiros, whose work is pictured here, really loved these new paintings. So they were traditionally mural artists. They worked with materials like oils and frescoes. But these new paints for them were much easier than those traditional materials to work with. They were alkali resistant, for example, and acrylics today still are alkali resistant. So this really made them great for outdoor use on murals. And here I have a wonderful quote by Sequeiros, and I'll go ahead and read it to you. "The acrylic medium produced and perfected is a great contribution to 20th century art. For all my work, no other medium could possibly give me the ease of manipulation. There is as much difference between acrylic and other mediums as there is between the burrow and the jet propelled motors." So it's making some big claims here for acrylic paints, right? But very enthusiastic about them. And you see as we get to the next slide that some of the first acrylic paints themselves came from Mexico. So Otto Röhm, who we mentioned in the beginning, the inventor of plexiglass and the first polymer resin, also invented in the 50s Roplex. And Roplex is the key binder ingredient in commercial house paints. There was an explosion in its use when it did come about in this industry specifically. If you remember, after World War II, all the GIs came back home. It was a home construction boom, right? Houses were being built all over the US. And this new paint with Roplex as its binder became really integral to part of that building boom. And it didn't take long for chemists and folks in the art material world to adapt Roplex and create what was the first acrylic polymer emulsion binder for acrylic paint. Some of the first ones included this that's pictured here. This is Polytech. It was developed by Jose Gutierrez in Mexico City in 1953. One of the next ones to come up was by Henry Levinson in Cincinnati. You'll know the name still today, Liquitex. And by the way, Polytech is still a brand that's available in Mexico. So they're still manufacturing today. And then, of course, we had Golden, who came out, but their first paint wasn't called Golden. The first brand was called Aquatech. So those are some of the earliest water miscible acrylics, water acrylics like we use today. All right, so who really embraced these new water-based acrylics? So the modern painters that we most associate with early acrylics include the color field painters. In the background here, you can see a painting by Morris Louis. And then in the inset here, we have Helen Frankenthaler. One of the benefits of acrylic paint that's different from oil paint is you can paint directly on the raw canvas. And this enabled these artists to stain their canvases with the paint in a unique way that wasn't possible with oil paint. So you get these wonderful veils of stained colors that they were really attracted to. And then also the pop artists really embraced this new media. Here's an image of James Rosenquist painting, who also was a sign painter, a commercial sign painter before his career in the arts, using some of those original oil-based acrylics. So he was very familiar with the medium. But they embraced it for a couple reasons, partly because their interest in commercial art and acrylics kind of emulated the look and finish of commercial art. So they like to mine it for that particular reason. But also just the general look and feel of the paint and the subjects that they were painting made acrylics a really meaningful medium for them. So the early painters for the new acrylics, the acrylics that we use today, were these color field painters and pop artists specifically. And of course, in the 70s, it exploded. Acrylic became, probably by the early 90s, the most dominant medium used in classrooms and by painting enthusiasts around North America. All right, let's talk about the binder real quickly. So the binder of any paint is what gives it its working characteristics, or what we call its working properties. For oils, it's linseed oil. For watercolor, it's gum arabic. And for acrylic, it's an acrylic polymer emulsion. So what is that? First of all, so what is an acrylic polymer emulsion? So let's break it down into its different terms here. So an acrylic is a type of resin. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning when we were looking at the history. It's part of the group of thermoplastics. More specifically, polymethyl acrylate is what it's called. And acrylic resin is used in textile finishes and adhesives. It's an excellent adhesive in lacquers and other related products to artist paint. Acrylic resins offer a huge advantage when used as an ingredient in paint over other types of paints because of the resistance to moisture, for example, better stain protection. So they last longer in that regard. They have better adhesion than most other paint binders. And then also greater resistance to blistering and cracking over time. And as I mentioned before, they're alkali resistant. So the acidic elements within the environment don't permeate this paint film when it's dry. In its solid form, acrylic resin can last for decades, and in the laboratory, we've tested it for much longer than that. So today we have all these tools to test the durability of a paint film, and I would say that without a doubt, acrylic passes those tests much better than other mediums that artists are using today. I think if oil paints were brand new today, the rigorous testing that acrylics have been through, they would struggle with some of that. Not saying that oils aren't going to last. Obviously, they've been around for centuries, right? But acrylics are no longer suspect as they were back in the 60s and 70s. They've definitely proven through the lab and through use their durability over time. The acrylic polymer, or a polymer in general, is defined, let's get into chemistry here real briefly. It's a large molecule composed of many repeating subunits. So that's a quick definition of a polymer. Polymers are both natural and synthetic. Familiar in almost all plastics, the term polymer, but also in natural things like DNA. DNA in its essence is a polymer, right? And then finally, the word emulsion. So emulsion is derived from the Latin word to milk, and milk is technically what we call an emulsion of fat and water. So the easy definition for emulsion is any mixture of two or more liquids that normally aren't mixable. And then we put them together with often a third ingredient or through a synthesizing process that enables those two to bond. Some natural examples or some easy examples are salad dressings, mayonnaise, milk I mentioned. These are all emulsions. So emulsions are common and have been common in painting for centuries. Tempera and casein both are binders that utilize this chemical process of emulsion. Casein has milk, tempera has egg, both containing something called lecithin, which is a natural emulsifying agent. All right, and then I should also note on the binder, and this kind of is throughout what I was saying too, binders have two essential jobs in making good paint. One is their ability to suspend the pigment, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So think of pigment as sand, or that you would dump into some water and stir it around, and the sand would disperse, but eventually it would sink down to the bottom, right? So pigment or a binder has to be able to suspend that pigment in place. So you stir it up and then hold it in place. So that's a characteristic of a binder when making a good paint. And then the other is adhesion to a surface. So it needs to hold that tight to whatever surface we're applying it to. And a third could even be creation of a paint film. Now that's not true for all binders. Gum arabic, for example, doesn't create a paint film like oils and acrylics do, but they all have suspension and adhesion as their primary properties to make them a good binder for paint. All right, pigments. Here's the fun stories. So let's talk about how we categorize pigments. There are two ways that we categorize pigments. One is by origin, and another is by how they refract or reflect light. And we do that by dimensionality. So let's talk first about origin. So there are three categories of pigments by origin. One is organic, the second is inorganic, and the third is synthetic. So organic pigments are those that come from plants or animals. And this fun little critter right here is the cochineal beetle, indigenous to Central and South America, the primary source for the color carmine historically. Dates all the way back to the 2nd century BC. Aztecs used it in their ceramics, in paintings, drawings, decoration, even in architectural design. And then, of course, in the 17th century, all those wonderful reds in Baroque painting came from carmine. So that's an example of an organic pigment. Next, we have inorganic pigments. Probably the most famous is the color ultramarine blue, which comes from this semi-precious stone, lapis lazuli. So lapis is mined almost exclusively in the mountains of Afghanistan. It made its way into the hand of Renaissance artists, and that's where it got its name, actually from Venetian traders, as ultramarine, meaning from beyond the sea or over the sea. So lapis was then and still is a very valuable mineral, worth more than gold by weight. So you can imagine artists who were using it in the Renaissance must have had either really good patrons or really deep pockets themselves. It became so influential and so symbolic that the church actually put restrictions on its use, meaning that it could only be used in particular subjects in painting, like the robe of the Madonna. So that's ultramarine blue. Now, both carmine and ultramarine today are synthetic pigments. So we've synthesized these pigments, changed their working properties by either altering their temperature, cooking them in essence, or mixing them with other ingredients. In the case of carmine, so we don't have to kill bugs to get the paint. In the case of lapis, so we can find a less expensive pigment, which is what we have for ultramarine today, which is usually a series 1 color, very reasonably priced pigment. But this idea of synthesizing pigments is nothing new. Artists have been synthesizing pigments for centuries, and a perfect example is my last image here. This is lead white. So what they would do is they'd take these coils of lead, and they would submerge them in vinegar or expose them to the fumes of vinegar, sometimes wrap them in cow dung to generate heat, and that would cause oxidation. And what you're seeing is this white crust that's developing on these coils of lead. They would take that, flake it off into a bowl, dry it in the sun, grind it up, and voila, you have lead white, probably the most popular white from the 15th century all the way up into the 20th century, in fact. Lead white, very much a favorite white pigment in oil painting. Of course, today we know that it's hazardous to your health, so it's been replaced by safer pigments like titanium. But this idea of synthesizing a pigment has been around for centuries. So we have organic, inorganic, and synthetic as our categories. But like I said, there's another way to categorize that, and that is by how it reflects or reflects light. So let's take a look at the different types of refraction in pigments and how we categorize them. So the first is one-dimensional pigments. So almost all traditional pigments we refer to as one-dimensional. And you can see in this image here, we have the pigment and the light waves hitting it. And what bounces back to us, in this case a blue, is how we perceive the color of that pigment. So it refracts back, absorbs the other colors. One of the specialty pigments we're going to be looking at today, the reflex colors, are phosphorus-based pigments. And they work a little bit differently. So you can see here that they have those same light waves hitting and refract back that primary or that dominant hue, which in this case is blue, but they also reflect back more than just what they absorb. And that's why we refer to them as fluorescent or reflex. They convert light energy in the dominant wavelength, but they also kick back some of those ultraviolet rays that are lower on the visible spectrum, ones that we don't typically see. And that's what makes these colors kind of have that glow, that intensity that we associate with phosphorus-based colors. So those are one-dimensional light refractions or one-dimensional pigments. All right, our next group are the metallic pigments. So these are referred to as two-dimensional pigments. So you can see here the light hitting it. And the base for most metallic pigments is a type of mica. So it's a common mineral. And then that mica is oxidized to create or generate different types of hues or colors. In this case, the background, we have gold, right? But they also act like a mirror. And that's where we get the two-dimensional reference here. It doesn't just reflect back a dominant hue, it reflects back all of the waves of the light that hits it like a mirror would do. And that's what gives metallics their special character. And then finally, our interference pigments. We call them pearl pigments in our Amsterdam line, and they're very special. They work very much like a metallic pigment at their base, but those layers of oxidation on top of what you see in a metallic color, the more layers you build, it changes the strength of different light waves. Some light waves are stronger than others. So you see how they'll bounce through at different intervals into the layers of oxidation, reflecting and interfering with each other back at us. And they create that pearlescent look. And you'll see when I put the paint out in the demonstration, how it really resembles a pearl in its bead. And it's really fascinating, really luscious to look at. But this is how an interference pigment works. Another way to kind of associate it is with a light prism. And you can see in the background a little bit of that image there, where all the light waves hit that pigment and then are dispersed or fractured and reflect out this whole array of light waves that we can see. And essentially with a pearl paint or an interference color, you have thousands of these little prisms inside of the paint refracting light back. And that's what gives them their very special character. All right, so let's talk about some general terms for the Amsterdam series line. So a couple things that I want to share here. First of all, there are 90 colors in the line, and that includes the specialty colors we're going to talk about today. There's a high pigment to binder ratio. So that means you're going to get very good tinting strength with these paints. We do have an Amsterdam Expert that's available. So that's our highest grade. It has a little more pigment in it and a finer grind. But the Amsterdam Standard is much better than a typical student grade paint. So you should expect to really see some wonderful colors and wonderful color mixtures with it. There's a fine grind and a triple wall mill. So a lot of people don't know this about the making of paint, but the fineness of the grind, so how small you grind the pigments, increases or improves the distribution of those pigments throughout the binder. And gives us better luminosity. So the grind of the paint is just as important as how much pigment is in it. And we do a fine grind for the Amsterdam Standard series. So you're going to get excellent pigment dispersion with really brilliant and true color as a result. All of these colors have a high light fastness rating. Most of them have excellent, which is the highest rating you can get. That's 100+ years under museum light conditions. There are also some good ratings in there. There are some exceptions, and those are the reflex colors, and I'll talk about those when we get into the demo. All the colors combined have both opaque and transparent colors available. So you have a complete palette for a variety of techniques. And I'll show you how to interpret on the tube whether the color is opaque or transparent. They're made with 100% acrylic resin binder. So you're going to have an exceptionally strong and durable paint film when you're using the Amsterdam. They're alkali resistant, which I mentioned before, which means these are perfectly safe to paint outdoors and murals, or even paint on furniture if you'd like. The proprietary preparation that we have makes this paint virtually odorless. You'll notice in some acrylics that there's a kind of an acrid smell that can come with them. Some people associate with kind of an ammonia smell. These are virtually odorless. You won't have any smell that you're gonna pick up working with these in your studio, which really makes for a comfortable work environment. All right, you guys ready for the demo?
Definitely are.
All right, let me back out of that. Here I am again. Any questions before I jump in on the presentation? Everybody taking notes for the quiz?
I hope they are. They better be. So far, we are good on the questions. They're just talking about all the different pigments and things that, like when you were talking about where the carmine came from. That
yeah.
Whole discussion of like mummy brown and all of that. So they're
very
yeah.
The history of pigments is so fascinating. There's some wonderful books that are available to read the stories. I mean, it's one thing to get into the technical aspects of it, but it's like an adventure story when you start reading about pigments. Wars were fought over pigments, and it really is incredible and rich history and a lot of fun to learn about as an artist for sure. So I'm glad people are into that.
Yes, and they're very excited about the giveaway. They're ready for
Oh,
it.
good, good. People, good. I have a great question too. I have a great question. So excellent. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the demo because I know there'll be some opportunities for some more questions there. So you should be able to see my work table there.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So let's mix some paint. So let me share with you what I'm working with here today first. So I've got all of the pearl colors out just to show you the range. So you can see there are 6 of them all together. There's a pearl white here, a pearl yellow here. And actually I talked about, let me see if I can get that to focus a little better. There we go. So a couple things on the tube I had mentioned when I was talking in the presentation. You'll see the name of the paint. You'll see this number here. This is our proprietary number. So this 818 is the same name or same number for this pigment, whether it's an acrylic and an oil and a watercolor. So that's very convenient if you're swapping between mediums. This little box here refers to the opacity. There are 4 different symbols that you'll come across when you're looking at Amsterdam paints or Royal Talens paints in general. This is the symbol for completely transparent. Then there's a semi-transparent. Actually, I'll show that real quick. You can see that with the line through it. That's semi-transparent. Then there's semi-opaque, which is half filled in like that. And then I don't have one out here today, and that's a completely opaque, and that square would be completely black. So those are the 4 symbols, and that's really convenient, especially if you're doing techniques like glazing, where you really need to be working with transparent pigments to get the full effect. So this really is a great tool, just looking at the tube without having to squeeze it out to know what the characteristic of the pigment is itself. So these plus signs are their light fast code. So 3+ is excellent. That's the highest light fast rating. As I mentioned before, that's 100+ years under museum light conditions. So all of the pearl colors have an excellent light fast rating. Now they all look like they're the same color, right? Like it's like white. So that's why we put these little stickers on there that kind of give you an idea of the yellow tint that you're going to get with this particular color, yellowish white. So there's a white, a yellow, we've got a red, we've got a blue, so the primaries, and then also a violet and a green, which I'm going to work with today. I think I'm going to use red, violet, and green today. So on this first exercise, I'm going to also use some of those one-dimensional colors we talked about. I've got some primary blue and primary yellow, and I'm going to be mixing with those. I've got one of these wonderful Practica black canvases. You can use these colors on any type of prime surface. I really like to show it on the black though, because the pearl colors really dance on that dark tone surface. So we're going to work on a black surface today. I've got some brushes, which I'll be using later on. In the mixing, I'm just going to use a standard palette knife here, mixing knife. And what I want to do is show you what the possibilities are for these paints. A lot of folks say, geez, that sounds cool, but what am I going to do with that, right? How do I make use of this particular color? So I'm going to squeeze it out onto the surface here.
Now, while you were squeezing those out, we did have a question about the smell, because you said there's no odor, but are there any other fumes that actually are coming off that you can't smell?
There are not. There's no outgassing from acrylics like you would get with a solvent, for example, like mineral spirits, turpentine. So you do not need to worry about any kind of off-gassing or VCOs on these paints at all. So good question. So you saw.
Why are you using gloves?
Why am I using gloves? Just to keep my hands clean. I'm a messy guy. Saves from washing time. So you can see that it looks like white, but you can also see that slight pearlescent feel to them. And to give you a better look, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a drawdown. So you'll see what the undertones tell a lot about a paint, right? Mm-hmm. And here, that's where we can see more of these colors. So in their undertones, that's where you can really see how these pigments react on the surface. Isn't that cool?
They're very cool. You can definitely see that color shining through.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of fun. All right. So what do you do with these? Now, I think, and I recommend that the real potential for these is in color mixtures. So creating greater luminosity in the colors, the standard colors that you're using traditionally in your palette. So I'm going to put some blue down here. Be generous here. I can be generous. I got lots of paint to use today. I'm going to try blue and yellow and show you some mixtures with these particular colors. Oh, lots of yellow there. All right, so let's go ahead and look a little undertone of these on the surface. So this is a semi-transparent color, blue. And then we've got a semi-opaque color in this yellow. So you can see how those colors are looking on the surface. Now let's mix them with the pearls and see how we can change their look and feel. And you can do this in any ratio. If you just want to add a little bit of this pearlescent to it to just pump up the light a little bit, that's fine. Or you can mix with a lot of that pearl color to create a really dynamic, almost pearlescent blue. I'm going to do about a 50-50 mix in here on these colors just to give us an idea how they look. And I think you're going to enjoy that. So I'm going to get a little bit of blue. So this is with the pearl red. You can see right away that it lightens it. I think these pearl colors are great to tint a color with versus using a white, for example. It doesn't wash out the color in the same way that a white would. So there's the blue by itself, and then there's with the pearl red, and you get those little reddish undertones. See the kind of violet hint to it?
Ooh, that is super.
Yeah, so nice color. So let's try it with a violet over here. Well, there's even more dramatic, right? It's always fun just to mix paint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the red and the violet are going to be similar, but look at how the violet undertone that it has. There you can really see it kind of kick off. So this is just with a 50-50 mix, and see, you can really create a more luminescent color, a lighter, a tinted blue, but without washing it out like you would with a white. And then also you get the feel for that little bit of extra color that mixes in. I'm really interested in seeing how this green is going to work with it, right? The green should really be nice. There you really get a feel for that green. That's nice. So 3 distinct colors. You really see that violet, don't you? When you kick it to the side, more so here in person than the camera's catching, but and that green too almost makes kind of a turquoise effect. Really nice. So that is with the blue. So using the pearls to mix with the traditional color. So let's try it with yellow. I'm going to use a little less yellow and a little more of the pearl just because the yellow is a little more opaque than the blue we're working with up above. So this is with the red. A little bit lighter there, a little warmer. There you can really see that warmth, huh? On the side of it. Nice. Now let's try that violet. This should be interesting because in a sense we're working with 2 complementary colors, right? The violet and the pearl. Pumps it up, reflects a little more light back than the yellow would all by itself, and then creates that wonderful undertone. And the presence of the pearl is going to increase, there you really see it, will increase as the color dries. So one thing about acrylic polymer, and you may not, or maybe you already know this, is in its fluid form, it's kind of milky white. And as it dries, it becomes clear. So what this does to the paint, and this is true for all acrylic colors, what this does to the paint means that the paint will darken slightly as it dries. And that's the nature of all acrylic paints. So what happens with these pearl colors is where you see a lot of kind of white in them as they dry. And I can show you an example. I've got one that I painted a little bit earlier. This is one that's been dried for a while, same as this color here. And you can see that it becomes darker and richer. That will happen in these mixtures too. And so we'll see more characteristics of the pearl as the paint dries. All right, this is the green. We're gonna mix with the yellow. Oh, look at that, you can see it, right? Almost looks blue there. Such a strong contrast. So those are our mixtures. Just a wonderful way to tint a color, change the temperature. And this is also something that crosses over when we're mixing our secondary, tertiary colors. So we can mix these together now. They both have the elements of the pearl inside of them, and we should be able to get some really distinct greens now using these three different mixtures.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions while you're mixing that, and I've been trying not to talk because I've had
that's okay.
Your screen a little bit bigger, and I don't want it to switch over to me too much. But someone's asking, does the paint have to be applied thinly to get that luminosity to it?
No, it doesn't. And I'm doing that mainly because, like I said, it's as the binder dries, it becomes more clear and you see it more dominant. So in the beginning, when I put it on really thick like that, the binder is kind of dominant, but as it goes over time, you'll see that more and more. So I go ahead and give you that undertone to see it, so you can see it rather than wait for it to dry to see it. I love these primary colors in the Amsterdam line, with or without the pearl colors. They're just really nice, true mixture in your secondaries. Right. Fun greens. Just a little addition richness there. That red really kind of shows up under there. That's nice. And then that green, you would, and that's what you expect, right? That green pearl mixed with that green just really gives it a nice sense of depth. So that's mixing with the pearl colors. And this is what I would recommend trying with these to really expand the vocabulary that you would maybe assign to these type of colors to begin with, right? They're great as glazes. They're great all by themselves. They're wonderful for a variety of effects and reflective qualities on the painting, but they're also a wonderful way to add a little more luminosity, give your colors a little more punch, and enhance the mixtures and kind of play around with the temperatures as well. All right, so those are the pearls in the specialty range. So now let's swap over to our metallics, and we're going to do a similar exercise with those. These are something that I am super big fan of. I use them a lot in my own painting. So we're going to use a couple colors here. I've got some of the copper. You can see this is a well-used tube, right? And you're going to love how these look out on the surface. So let's put some copper down. Then I've got the gold. This is the deep gold. The Amsterdam metallics, I think, are some of the best out there. The metallic is such a rich, deep color in the Amsterdam line. This is pewter. These colors here, I should note real quick too, all of the metallics are semi-opaque and also have excellent light fast ready. So let's go ahead and mix some of these with some of the primaries. So I'm going to mix some red, primary magenta over here.
And while you are squeezing that back out again, I have a couple questions about when you like the the binders in them, how quickly do they dry? Because I have some people asking if there's one, like if the additives keep it open longer or if it slows it, like
Right. No, they'll have the same dry time as any traditional acrylic. So the pigment, in this case, is what gives it a special effect, but the binder in the specialty colors is the same binder that's used across the line. So you're going to have the same working property there. Most acrylics, and it's true for Amsterdam as well, will dry completely within 24 to 72 hours, depending on how thickly they're applied. Although as you're painting with them, especially in thin layers, within 15-20 minutes, they can be dry to the touch, you know, and also your environment has something to do with that too, humidity specifically. An acrylic polymer dries through the process of evaporation, which is a pretty rapid chemical process, but that means that it's also affected by heat and humidity. So the drier it is and the hotter it is, the faster they're going to dry also. Good question. All right, so I've got my copper, my gold, and my pewter, and then I've got magenta, yellow, and blue. The same thing here. These colors all by themselves are wonderful to use. They have just really, like I said, rich surfaces, really fun to work with, especially that copper. Give you a closer look. But they are also great colors to mix with. And let's do some examples. So I'm going to take some red and I'm going to mix with the copper. Nice color there. Now we're going to mix the red with the gold. And again, how much you add is completely up to you. If you want to have just a hint, like let's just put a little bit of the gold in here first. So just a little bit of gold with the red. It's almost like adding a little bit of yellow to it. Lightens it up a little bit, right? And then we can add a little bit more and more like what we did with the copper over here. And we can push that effect even more. So it's really up to you on what you're trying to achieve in your painting, on how much you can use this to dramatic effect. All right, and finally, pewter, which is a fun color. Take a look at those. Isn't that great? I really love it with the copper. What a warm, beautiful color that is. And you can see that flash. Remember, the metallic pigments are like little mirrors, so they reflect back more light. Isn't that a wonderful look? Really nice. All right, so that's with the primary magenta. Now what happens when we work with yellow and copper? It's a nice color. Nice, wonderful earth color you get from it. The gold I especially like. I've done this in some of my work to different degrees, but it's a nice alternative to a yellow ochre. There's actually some paints, like in our Rembrandt line, we have a gold ochre. See what I mean by kind of resembling that yellow ochre look? So that's a little bit of the gold mixed in with the primary yellow. And finally, the pewter. Almost a green, huh? With that. Cool. Look at the broad temperature range we're able to create using these metallics and that yellow. Very cool yellow to that extremely warm, almost like a sienna, isn't it? And then that ochre. Those are some really nice colors. Nice color grouping here. All right, last but not least, let's see what happens with the blue. So here we have a cool color. Let's mix it with some of these warm metallics and see what we get. It's a real rich color. Almost a violet, yeah? Earthy violet. This would be a great color for shadows. Take some of the gold. This will be really interesting to see here. Warmed it up really nice, huh? Wonderful. And finally, with the pewter. Oh, that's stunning. That's just a real intense kind of blue. So there you get a closer look. And that in the copper and the blue, beautiful. So there's a wonderful range of colors that we got using the primaries and a metallic. So we had the primary magenta and copper, and then with the gold and with the pewter, the same with the yellow, and the same with the blue down below. Nice variation. So hopefully this gives you an idea. This is kind of a point of departure, right? How these metallics can be used in mixtures with traditional colors like these three primaries to create more luminescent colors and just some real dynamic mixtures, especially on this dark tone surface. Any questions?
We do have a couple of questions. We may actually switch back to the gallery view so people can see both still.
Sure.
They were asking if you use this as like an underpainting and you start glazing transparent oils on top, are you going to lose any of that luminosity, or is it still going to kind of shine through?
It will shine through, and it will all depend on the pigments that you're mixing with, right? So the more transparent the paint that you're mixing with, the more dramatic the effect. The more opaque the color, the less dramatic. So like mixing with a white, for example, you wouldn't get a lot of a kick. You'd get some, but not nearly as much as you would with a blue, for example, here that was more of a transparent color. You kind of see it in our mixture here. Both the magenta and the blue were semi-transparent colors, and then this was a semi-opaque color, and the yellow dominates the mixtures more so than within the other, the combinations. So the opacity of the paint you're mixing these with will impact that. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it successfully. It just means you'll have to adjust the ratio of the mixture.
I'm trying to see. I know a lot of people are just going ooh and ah to all the different tones that you got. Just those, just the simple.
Yeah, isn't it fun? I mean, mixing paint's so fun to watch. And then, these are the basic. Again, I could go in here and start pulling these colors together and creating some.
And I almost forgot. Someone was asking about your palette knife. Which palette knife is that?
Just your basic painting knife, round edge. I don't know the particular name for it. I guess I'd call it a pear shape or teardrop.
It reminds me of the we have one that's a T10. It's very similar in shape. It looks about the same size too.
Yeah.
I'll have to add that for everyone to find the right one and add it to the teacher's card.
Yeah. And this is just the one I literally grabbed out of my palette knives today. Whatever knife you're comfortable mixing with is the one you should use. Just even a traditional kind of palette knife and
as a reminder to everyone watching, we are giving away a set of 90.
Yeah, coming up here.
So he had a presentation earlier on the history of it and the details of like the binders and things. And If you watched it, you will have the answer to his question that will be coming later on. So if you don't, though, you can still submit an answer, and you might know it off the top of your head. You know, I don't know what he's going to ask, but he has a very good question.
So look at those secondary colors. I have not done this before in this demo to kind of pull them together, but you get some wonderful secondary colors too.
You really do. Those primaries do mix really nicely together. With the primary, are they labeled primary on
They
the
are. They are. So let me go ahead and grab them and kind of focus in on again. So this is the primary yellow, and it's 275 is our proprietary number. And then you've got the primary magenta, number 369.
Here, I'm going to switch over to make sure this is bigger.
And then the primary cyan, which is the 572. All right, so how are we doing on time? Okay.
It is, we got about 4 or 5 minutes left.
All right, let's go ahead and give away some paint.
Yeah.
Let me switch my camera here. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and I hopefully shared some information that was new for you, and from seeing the colors mixed to kind of understand and appreciate the potential of using these colors, not just by themselves for a little extra, you know, shine or glitz, but they work really wonderful as mixtures to create some really rich and luminescent colors. So with that being said, here's my question from the presentation. All right.
Everyone listening?
Everybody ready? All right. So there was a dapper gentleman, and he was the inventor of the acrylic polymer resin, which he patented in the 1930s, and also invented plexiglass. Just type in his name. Type in his name.
Now, cough, cough, you guys might be able to cheat a little bit. If someone writes the right answer down, you might be able to do that. This giveaway is only for people that are watching this live. So if you are watching this in the future as a rewatching it and you're missing this, I'm sorry. But join us live next time. We have some awesome giveaways.
I'll share my screen here so everybody can see. This is the set right here. So all 90 colors. And they open up. It's a wonderful box. It's a real sturdy box too. I have a smaller set here in my studio, so it's great for storage. And then they come in these individual tubes. Here you can see all the pearl colors and the metallic colors. But these trays are little separate 2 trays, so you can separate them out. So they're great for storing the paints too.
Yeah. So just remember, if you haven't stuck that answer to that question in, make sure you do it now, because you can get that set. No, it doesn't have to be the first person who got the answer right. We're going to put everybody who comments on this video in a random drawing. So then I will be contacting you guys, whoever wins the giveaway, but there will only be one. There will only one.
There will only be one. I like it. Very prophetic.
Oh,
very prophetic.
Everyone cross fingers.
So any more questions, or we all good?
I have a lot of answers just coming through.
Okay, cool.
So far, I think if anybody has a question, I think make sure to put that in the comments below. I'll be checking back in and making sure that all the
I'll check in too. I'll go and visit the page too and peruse through the questions and do my best. And if you would like to get more information besides our website, you can visit our Facebook page, which is Royal Talens NA for North America. So Royal Talens NA, and we have tons of videos in there and tips and inspirational activities, artist interviews, you name it. So definitely check us out there for more, and you can certainly message us there as well.
Now, do you have your own personal Instagram?
Yeah, my website's jeffolsonart.com, and you can contact me through that as well.
And I just want to say thank you so much for being here and showing us all those amazing colors. They're really pretty. I need
They are fun.
Like everyone in the comments was like, I need this. I need the tag.
It does. It's a must-have. It's a must-have.
It is. It is. Well, thank you again so much. And for everyone watching, just as a quick little reminder, remember we have the self-portrait contest going on right now. I just wanted to make sure to remind you guys, it does end next Sunday. So if you haven't submitted, make sure you do that soon, because midnight is the cutoff time. This Sunday coming up, April 18th, in case you're watching this in the future. So make sure to do that. Now, again, if you do any art with this beautiful acrylics, make sure to tag on Facebook, tag the Jerry's Live page, which is a wonderful community of artists that get together. It's not just me, it's a bunch of other artists, and you can post your artwork. You can ask questions on, hey, I'm not entirely sure. I was thinking of, maybe the drawing perspective is a little off. Am I overthinking this? Things like that. And all of the artists kind of get together and we promote each other and help each other. And it's a really fun community to be a part of.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So you can post it on there. You can also tag my Emmy, host of Jerry's Live. It's Emmy. I always do this. Words are hard. But the name of my host page is Emmy, host of Jerry's Live.
Oh, cool.
All of that. Cool. So you can tag me there as well, and then make sure to tag the class code, which is JL190. And again, if you are interested in any of these materials that are JL190, and the teacher's cart will come up, and then that will give you everything that we went over today, which is really awesome. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to have you back here.
Oh, perfect. I can't wait to come back. Thank you again, Emmy. It was a pleasure.
We're going to try and sign off eventually.